In this video, we are going to talk about the most fundamental jobs of a second verse, and we're going to talk about a bit of a checklist of things we want to make sure our second verse is accomplishing. Let's talk about it. The first job we want to make sure our second verse is accomplishing is that it deepens the meaning of the upcoming chorus. We want to make sure that the chorus hits differently the second time around compared to the first time. Note that this doesn't mean that the second verse changes everything. It doesn't need to be a huge plot twist. It just needs to recontextualize the chorus so that the chorus hits a little bit differently or a little bit harder and has more gravitas the second time around. Thinking of this really simply, you just need to really make sure that the second verse doesn't just say the same thing the first verse did, just in a different way. To go back to the same kind of depressing example that I used in the chorus video, let's take that divorce example again, because that's a good way to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about here. Let's say your first verse sort of talks about like this lady cheats on this guy, right? So now in the chorus, the guy is thinking to himself, I feel like I need to leave, but I also feel like I should stay. But then in the second verse, we get a little more information that might change things. Now you learn they've had like 20 years together and they have kids that are 18. One's about to graduate high school, but they also have their youngest kid is like 8. So now they're going to be affected by this divorce, and that might make that next chorus hit differently because now it recontextualizes the state that the guy is in who's considering, should I leave or should I stay, and being conflicted about it. Now it makes more sense that he's conflicted about it. So that's sort of the idea that we're going for, just giving new pieces of information that somewhat change how the chorus hits. The second thing that your second verse really needs to do is to progress the story of the song. The reality is that a song is not very long, and realistically you tend to have really only 3 sections that tell a story, because generally the choruses don't really tell story. They're more about big picture stuff. They're more about generalized ideas and about emotions. So usually only your first verse, second verse, and bridge are the places that you can actually advance the story. So you need to take advantage of every single one of these sections. So specifically a way to actually advance the story is to maybe go in a different time frame. So maybe the first verse, for example, is in the present tense. Maybe in the second verse, think to go past tense and tell a story from the past that, again, will recontextualize the chorus and change some things, change some perspectives, give new information that sort of adds to the song. Or maybe you want to go forward in time and you want to talk about your hope for the future, or maybe what you dread about a possible future. The second verse can also be a really good place to actually get even more detailed into the nitty-gritty and really dive even deeper into the story. Or on the other hand, there are some songs that sort of expand the second verse. So a common trope that you'll see in a lot of songs is the first verse will be very like I want this, I want that, I want the world to be like this. And then the second verse sort of expands it a little bit and says, we want this, we want that, we want the world to be like this, right? Something like that. It's not always about what we want the world to be, but those songs do tend to use that trope quite a bit. That's a perfectly fine trope to use in the sense that you are opening it up a little bit more, and it may not be full chorus level of like we're all in this together, all singing together, generalized themes, but a second verse can be a place to really start getting a little bit closer to the area that your chorus is in for how general it is and how it's about generalized emotions and things that everyone can relate to. So overall, what you need to be thinking about is how can the second verse do something differently than the first verse that somehow impacts the rest of the song and adds to the song, because the second verse is really maybe the most difficult part of the song to write for many reasons. I think the main reason is that if you have only 2 verses, the tendency is you write the first verse first, and your second verse is constrained to have the same syllable count and the same rhyme scheme usually as your first verse, but you need to write all new lyrics that fit into this very rigid structure that you already have because you already wrote a first verse, and the verses are going to be the same musically. They're going to have the same melody, right? Whereas with a chorus, it's the same chorus every time with the same lyrics and the same rhythms and all that. And the bridge only plays once, so you don't have to worry about that. So the second verse is a section that is a very difficult part of the song to write, but hopefully this is a good way to give you a little bit of insight of directions you can go to make sure that your second verse is doing its job. And the last job of a second verse that I want to talk about here is that it should accelerate back towards the next chorus. Let me explain what I mean by accelerate. First of all, what I don't mean is that I'm not saying the tempo should actually start getting faster and faster and faster as you get closer to the end of the second verse and closer to the beginning of the next chorus. What I am saying is it should have the illusion of sort of accelerating forward. And we all can hear in music, right? When music feels laid back, when it feels like it's driving forward, when it feels like it's sort of revving and just like energy is just waiting to explode. We all sort of intuitively know when we hear that in music. So the second verse tends to sort of have that contained feeling of like, it's really accelerating towards something. And there's several ways to give this illusion. One way that's really simple is you'll often notice that a first verse will be double the size of a second verse. Or seen another way, you have a song structure that's essentially verse 1, verse 2, chorus, verse 3, chorus, right? Where you have the second verse that's effectively half the size of the first verse. This is one great way to give that illusion of accelerating back to the chorus, because we don't make you wait as long between the first chorus and the second chorus as we did between the beginning of the song and the first chorus. Another way to do this is through instrumentation, having a drum beat that sort of has that driving feel, or maybe some revving guitar parts that are maybe doing some palm muting or something like that. There's plenty of tricks you can do to sort of make sure that the arrangement makes it feel like the second verse has more movement to it than the first verse. Even a common thing that's done is the first verse often won't have drums at all, but the second verse, drums have usually come in by then. Maybe the first chorus was also really small and intimate feeling, so the drums didn't come in yet, but they definitely come in for that second verse. Or they came in with the chorus, and guess what? The drums aren't going anywhere now, they're staying. Even simple things like that can help make that second verse have more of a driving feeling so that it feels like it's accelerating back into the next chorus. And one of the main reasons that we want our second verse to feel like it's accelerating back towards the chorus is once we hear the chorus for the first time, usually a switch goes off in our head that's like, oh, that was awesome. I can't wait to hear that again. So we want to give the listener a good reason to believe, oh, we're working our way back to the chorus. But if you go back to a really laid back second verse, it might not have that feeling. It might start to lose energy rather than sort of maintaining energy, or sort of containing energy in a way that you can tell it's ready to explode back into another chorus. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and if it was, something else you might find helpful is my free guide on 10 different ways to start writing a song. It gives you 5 ways to start a song from a lyrical standpoint and 5 ways from a musical standpoint. So whether you're somebody who prefers to write lyrics first or music first, or a combination, there are 5 different ways for you. By the way, I highly recommend trying the other one. If you are a big fan of one, try the other one. You might end up learning to like the other one more. I used to be always lyrics first. I eventually learned to like music first better. I thought it was easier for me to write music and then write lyrics that fit with the music. I found that easier than starting with lyrics and then having to write music that fit with that lyrical feel. But hey, no matter what, you should try both. But also, one of the main reasons for this guide is that as songwriters, it's easy to get stuck in ruts where we start writing songs that all sound the same or sound a little too familiar. And we tend to start writing songs in the same way. We all have that one way we really like to write a song that we can get stuck with, and eventually it makes us go creatively dry, and it makes us less enthusiastic about songwriting. So for a lot of us, it might be sitting with an acoustic guitar, coming up with a chord progression, and then singing over the top. For me personally, the one I most often go to is sitting at the piano and coming up with a piano riff. And from that piano riff, then writing a melody. That's my main go-to. We all have those go-tos, and that's fine to have, but we want to make sure to change it up, because a great way to change it up creatively and to reinvigorate our creativity is just by changing up how we start a song. If we sit down and instead of saying, oh, I'm going to come up with a chord progression again, but instead say, I'm going to write a cool bass line. That is a great way to make sure your song goes in a new, different direction and that you stay creatively stimulated and excited about songwriting. So that's just one example, but there are plenty of other ways to start writing a song. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out. Link in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll talk to you in the next one.